Okay, so let's talk about what we are going to talk today is we are going to see how we can we are going to see how we can call the apex methods, and there are two different ways that we can utilize to call the apex method from Lightning Web Component. Okay, so now there are two different ways. One of them we have already talked about, how we can utilize wire method to call the other JavaScript API methods like get record and some other values, some other methods, right? With the help of wire method. We have seen how we could utilize the property and how we could utilize the method whenever we are working with wire method. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the other way as well, which is calling the apex using the imperative method. But before we get started and start working with the imperative way, we are definitely going to take a look into the wire adapter that we talked about. So what it takes to call the call the Salesforce method from the Lightning Web Component. So there are a few things that we need to make sure that our method has, otherwise our method will not be visible into the Lightning Web Component. The one and very important thing is that our method must be Aura enabled. Okay, whatever the method that we are creating, it must be public and static, and it must be annotated with the @Aura enabled. Now, if you are calling the same method using the wire decorator, then it must be catchable equal to true. If your method does not have catchable equal to true, you will not be able to call that method using @wire decorator, wire adapter. Whatever the data that you are returning, or whatever the data that you are getting back from your Lightning, uh, I will say not Lightning Aura, I would say the wire adapter. So let's say you're calling a method called get contact list, and you're using @wire decorator to call the method, and that method is actually returning the list of contact. So that data is going to be read only. So if you really wanted to change the data, you will not be able to change it. And if you really have to change that, if you really have to change the data, then we will see other way for changing the data. But the exact data that you're getting from Salesforce as part of wire decorator, that is immutable. That means you cannot modify it. And if you try to modify it, we will get the error, and we will see what error you will be getting. And if we wanted to refresh the information, so let's say that we have a Lightning data table, and on the data table, we are displaying some accounts. If we make the changes into any of the account, click on a save button. And after clicking on a save button, we really wanted to see the updated value. So in that case, we need to use the method, and that method is basically refresh apex. This method we will be seeing in case when we will be working with Lightning data table. But this method is used for refreshing the data from the server when you are using a wire decorator to get the information from Salesforce. Okay, using apex, especially apex, it's not going to work for any other mean. This is only for apex. Now, as we have already talked about any method that we wanted to call from Salesforce or using the Lightning library like UI record API, first of all, we have to import it. And this is the import statement, very simple, like we have done multiple times. It is going to be import method name from, we will say @Salesforce, and this time what we wanted to refer is we wanted to refer apex. Earlier we have used a schema, if you remember, because we wanted to read the object, their fields. But this time we wanted to use apex because we wanted to go to apex class. So we will say @Salesforce /apex /namespace. So by default, our class does not, our org don't have any namespace for the classes. So it's going to be blank. So we can get rid of this namespace in case of the class is part of our own org. And then class name dot method name. Okay. And calling the method, you have already seen how you could call the method using wire decorator. Now this is again a syntax. And the syntax we talked about, we have learned about the syntax about our wire method earlier as well. Again, I'm going to reiterate it. Let's say that your method name is, yeah, someone was saying something. Okay. So let's say your method name is apex method name. You have some parameters that your method accepts. So you can use opening and closing curly braces. And this is the JSON object we talked about. Okay, in JSON object format, like record ID, whatever the record ID we wanted to send. This is a private property or a method we talked about. It could be a private property or it could be a wired method. And class name, this is the one, basically this is first class and this is a method name. Okay, like this is basically nothing. It is a first class is the name of our class, just the dummy class. Hello world is nothing, it is a method name. Okay, so this is the syntax that we have for our wire decorator. Any questions so far? Because we have also covered wire decorator earlier as well. So I'm hoping that it should be clear. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's create a component here. And I'm going to create a component and I will name it as account list, or maybe instead of account, I would say contact list. And for this component, what we are going to do is we are going to fetch the 10 contacts from the Salesforce and going to iterate those contacts and display into the UI. So we definitely need an Apex class because we are looking into how to call the Apex class method using wire decorator. So let's create a class and I'm going to name it as contact service. You could name it anything. The class name could be anything. And this is going to be the default structure for your class when you are creating using VS Code. And we have to create a method. As we talked about, this method must need to be public, static in nature. A return type could be anything. It could be void, list of objects, list of S object, list of standard or custom object, or it could be integer, number, ID, anything, any kind of data type. So for now, let's make it as void. Okay. And then method name. So let's say get contact list. This is the name of our method. Now what we wanted to get is we wanted to get the 10 contacts. So let's create a list of contact and name the list. You could name it as anything. I'm just saying contact list. Use the assignment operator, and we really wanted to make the SOQL query. So we will use opening and closing square brackets. And here we are going to use our query, like select ID, name from, I think let's add a couple of more fields like phone or email from contact. Okay. And let's add the limit of 10 because we wanted to add only 10 records. Now this is our method, which is doing nothing. It's just doing the query. Still our component is not going to receive this. Okay. So you have to use a return statement so that your method can return anything from where this method is being called. So this return is saying, okay, if you call this method, I'm going to give you the list of 10 records that is going to accept the ID, name, email, and phone. But if you see, we are returning it, but we have not defined a return statement. Not return statement. We have not defined the data type, what kind of information this method is returning. So as this is returning the contact list and the data type of this list is list of contact. So the same data type is going to be there in place of void. And one thing is also remaining, that is the method should be Aura enabled. And one last thing that we talked about is if our method is going to be called from wire decorator, it must be using catchable attribute as true, because the catchable The reason, because this is wire method results are always going to be read only, and this cache will make this result as read only. And let's go ahead and deploy this. Remember to deploy this Apex class before you start developing your component, because if you don't deploy the Apex class, you might get into the error, say that this method does not found or cannot find the reference for this method at the time of deployment of your Apex class. Now, sorry, not deployment of Apex class, deployment of our Lightning Web component. Now, step one is to import the method. Okay, import the method. So how we are going to import it? It's pretty simple. We'll say import the name of our method. It could be anything, but usually we use the best practice as we give the same method name as we have in our Apex class. And then we will say from, and we are going to say @Salesforce Apex /, and here you type your class name, that is contact service dot the method name, get contact list. And you are done with the import of your data, sorry, your method. Now here we really need to call this this method using wire. So you could say, okay, go ahead, import the wire. And this method, you know, is returning the list of contact. So we wanted to store with the track variable. So we will import @track as well. Now first let's create the variable called @track, and we will say records. Let's create another variable and we would say errors. Now let's create like wire method call. So we talked about it's going to be @wire, the adapter ID. In this case, this is get contact list. Does it accept any parameter? No, it does not accept. If you see, your class does not accept any parameter. So you really don't need to provide any parameter. And you can say directly like wired contact or contacts. As usual, just say error and data, and then use if and else condition to display the data or display the error. And we could say this dot records equal to data. And here we will say this dot errors. If there is any error, we would say assign whatever the error is coming into the error variable. And finally, you could also do the console.log in order to see if the data is coming or if the error is there in your component. So far, everyone is good. Any questions? Now let's create our HTML component. As usual, we are going to put the lightning card. Title, I'm going to say wire method call. And changing the paragraph to division tag. Not going to have anything in the UI, but just wanted to have this so that our component actually gets visible into the UI component. Now at the last, let's go ahead and make sure it is visible to Lightning App Builder to test it. Okay, so we are done with this. Let's deploy this to our Salesforce org and we would be able to see the magic. So I'll add this component into my home page. You could add it, you could expose it to any other pages, and you can add it somewhere else. And it will be as easy as we have seen in the previous videos. Okay. So we've done here because this is the output of our component because we don't have anything else. So let's save it. Sometimes it takes time. Okay, now changes are saved. Let's get back to Salesforce. Yeah, now we are here into our component is getting displayed. Let's do the right click and select inspect. And okay, you see here, let me do it on the right side. Yeah. So you could see there is an array which says that there are 10 records. That means the name of the contact and then the email and then phone if the contact has. Otherwise, ID, name, and email is there that we are able to see. And we are good. That means our wire method is calling the Apex class, giving us the list of contacts. Those are 10 contacts like 0 to 9. And we are able to put into the debug log into the console of our browser. Now, as we talked about, there would be a this data, whatever the data we are getting is read only. Okay, we cannot really make the changes. How? Let's modify our query, and instead of I will say account ID as well as I will say account.name. So basically, what we are doing here is we are querying the account. We are querying the account name. Okay, and let's deploy this. Now, let's say what you wanted to do is you wanted to loop through this data. Okay, loop with this data attribute, and then you wanted to add a new attribute into your object. Okay, new attribute, and that is basically nothing. It's account name. Okay, so currently your data looks like this. It has got list of records, and then it has got multiple arrays. Okay, sorry, multiple objects. And your objects has like ID, name. Okay, it has ID, it has name, it has email, it has phone, right? Like this. Now what you wanted to do is you wanted to add this account name attribute for in all your objects like this. And this account name is going to contain the name of your account, whatever you are getting from this attribute, from this variable. Okay. So how you will do is basically you need to go ahead and iterate with this data attribute, do the for loop and work with the single record, and then only go ahead and make the changes. So how you will do is you'll say, okay, we are going to use for each method. Okay, ARR, or I'll just say data dot for each. This is the syntax. It actually takes 3 parameters. If you see, what is the value, what is the index, and then what is the array that you are trying to iterate with. Okay, and then so what it does basically, it takes a callback function. So you could say either something like this. Oh, okay, or you could use the arrow functions. So most of the time you would see the arrow functions would be there in the code if you look into the code. Now this callback function takes 3 things. If you hover over again to the method, okay, it takes what is the value, and it also gives you the index. You see here, like, sorry, first parameter is value, second parameter is index, third parameter is the complete array. Something like this: value, index, and array. So this array is a read-only array. It contains this complete array that you are trying to iterate. Index is going to give you the index number like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and value is going to be your current object, because this method return list of contact objects. So one by one contact are going to be iterated, and this value is going to contain at a time one contact object. So as you know, it is going to be a contact object. Best practice is use as contact or maybe item like this. Okay. And as we are not using the others, we are going to get rid of the other attributes, or maybe let's keep as it is. Now, what you want to do is you want to say item dot account, maybe account underscore name equal to, for now, let's quickly have a simple value that is salesforce.com. And then assign whatever, after the modification, assign whatever the modified data you have. Let's try to deploy this. As we said, this value is going to be read only. We cannot modify it. We should be seeing some error into the browser console. So let's refresh this page after the deployment of updated code. So you could clearly see there is an error called uncaught. I hope everyone can see. This is the error uncaught within the parenthesis in promise. Okay. If you click on this proxy object, you would see some error, or maybe you not see some error, but there is some error basically. Sometimes it actually gives us the error, something called falsy, or there is some fancy error we cannot really remember it, but it actually gives you the error. And this error is because you're trying to modify the object which is read only. Whatever the outcome that you get, whatever the return that you get from a method, okay, that is really going to be read only. Now, if you really wanted to modify it, there could be a requirement where you say, okay, I wanted to use a wire method, and then I wanted to modify the information. But before I go ahead and take the other use case, questions, any questions that you have in your mind? If you're speaking, your voice is really weird.
Amit, in query, like we have account dot name, right? And in line number 17, you are using account underscore name. Uh, why are you using account underscore name? Like, because in the query, we are using account dot name, right?
Are you done?
In the query, if you open the class, right? Can you open the class, please?
Okay, I think we lost you. I cannot hear you. So, but I got the question what you. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, did you lost me for some time? Yeah, Rohit, can you confirm if you lost me sometime in between? Oh, if you are speaking, okay.
Amit,
There were okay.
can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
So yes, you got disconnected for a few minutes.
Okay, okay. So yeah, I was saying that I got your question. Basically, what you're saying is, the question is like you're saying I'm using account.name for the query, but I'm using account underscore name here. Okay. So let me first explain you one concept of JavaScript. Not sure if you're familiar. So this is an object, right? This is an object. Everyone is familiar with this. Okay. So now these are the three parameters that these are the three properties that you have for that object. Okay. Now let's say I wanted to add another property here. So how I would be able to add it? I would say user dot maybe let's say first name. Okay. And I could say John and add it. Now, if we print the user, we will see that there is a new property added that is named as first name. Okay, this concept is clear to everyone, right? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, so this is what we've got. Now, what is happening here is this query is returning us the 10 contacts, like 10 contact records. We have got the 10 contact records in this data array. Okay, like this. If I have to simulate it, this is going to give you the information something like this in an array. And every like this array is going to contain nothing. It's going to contain the objects like this. Okay, and this objects is going to have the attributes like ID and then name and then email, like phone, right? It's going to have phone. It's going to have account ID, and then it is going to have account as an another object, and this object is going to have another field called name. That's basically how it interpret in the UI when you try to print it, this kind of query, the relationship query. Okay, so there is a new object gets created for your relationship object, the parent object, and then it just go ahead and print that. Okay, so this interpretation is correct to everyone? Okay, now when we are doing the for loop, what happens? It's going to pick one by one, like it's going to pick one record at a time. If I have 10 records, it's going to pick one at a time. That's what we are doing here is we're picking one record at a time. This is the item. So when we say item, for example, this is the first object that we have got. Now, if you see here how we did added an attribute here, the same way I'm just adding a new attribute to my object, that is account underscore name, and providing a static value. I'm not touching this. I'm not touching this particular piece of code so far. I'm just saying whatever the object it is coming, just go ahead, modify the each object, add a new attribute in that object called account name. And now how the data is going to look like is after the modification, something like this, where there is going to be a new attribute added, account name, with the value salesforce.com. So that's what I did. I just added a new attribute. I did not touch whatever there in the query part. Is it clear now? And that's how you add the new attribute every time you need for your purpose. You'll definitely need these kind of attributes in coming videos. You will see how we are going to add, and you will also need in your real time as well to basically this is something like adding the calculated fields at the runtime wherever you need it. Okay, so now if you really want to modify this, okay, any question apart from this that you guys have? Okay, so if you don't have a question, then I have a question. What is a use case when you are going to use wire method to call the Apex class? What would be the use case when you will prefer wire method? Anyone can unmute yourself and then maybe share your thoughts on that. It could be wrong, it could be right, but that's fine. I just wanted to hear because you really don't have an answer question, so I need to ask it. bulk DML operation, but wire method is read only. You cannot really do the DML. You cannot really modify it. Wire method cannot really do the DML. See, that's why basically I keep asking you that keep asking the question, like if you don't understand what's the use of a certain things that you're learning, of a certain concept or a term, that's useless. Even if I'm telling you that's not benefiting you, then there is no benefit of me telling you that what a concept is. So you should be really more tentative and think what you can learn, and you should always be having a question in your mind, why I am doing this. If you wanted to learn something new, you should be having a question, why. If you're clear with the why part, how part is very easy. You can always do the Google, you can always ask someone, but why part is really important. So as we said that wire method returns the read only data. Okay, we cannot modify it. So if there is a requirement where you say, okay, I'm going to create a Lightning Web component that is just going to read the data from the Salesforce and going to display in the Lightning component as it is, like Sweta mentioned in the comment, right? In the chat, Sweta has added. So if you wanted to work with the read only concept, you really don't need to modify the data. You really don't need to do the DML. You really don't need to work on the modification part. Then wire method is a best fit, because wire method are catchable. These are much faster than imperative way. Okay, then you have to use wire method. But let's say in some cases, like we as a developer, especially like the person who basically are uh, more experienced, like me and Rohit and other people who have really done good amount of work on LWC, what they do is they really play smart. What they say, okay, even if I have to modify the data, not DML, okay, DML is not allowed at all in the wire method. So now what we say, okay, I wanted to get the list of records, and then I wanted to do the manipulation, maybe add new attributes here like a wrapper, and then display the data into the UI. Then what we do is we go ahead and say we are going to clone the object now. So the key here is that is clone the object. It could be clone the object or records. I'm sorry, array. And clone it and store it in a variable and do the manipulation and then display into the UI. Okay. So how you are going to clone this, we have already seen. So it's going to be very easy. Let's create another variable called, maybe you can say cloned data. And what is the return type of your method? That is array, right? List of contact. So how we denote the array in JavaScript is with the help of square brackets. Just say square brackets, use 3 dots, that is also known as a spread operator, and then say data. And just now use this cloned data for iterating, making the changes. And then when you are assigning the information to the property of your class, use the cloned data there as well. This way you would be easily able to, now what you're doing is you're making a shallow copy here, storing it into another variable. So what happens here, basically the reference gets deleted. Different gets deleted, right? We talked about the how JavaScript stores the object behind the scene. So if we just go the equal sign, it's going to keep the reference. But if you use 3 dots and then do the shallow copy, or there is another way that you could do is, that's my favorite way. That is, I usually use json.stringify. First, what I do is I go ahead and convert my object into the string format. And then with the help of json.parse method, I can again convert that string to the object format. So basically, this is my favorite way to go ahead and clone the object, to make sure that I'm removing every possible reference for this particular data, for this particular variable that is coming back from Salesforce. So is it clear now how to do the cloning, how to then work on the cloned data or on the cloned variable that we have got? And after you're done, you just deploy it. But before we see the demo, are we clear? Any questions? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, so we are clear. So let's see what happens, what outcome we are getting now. Yes, we can call. We are going to see how to call that. Or if you're saying that we can call, then yes, we can call. Okay, we are still getting the error. And that's why I usually prefer the other way to clone the object, because sometimes it also does not work. It's really why JavaScript is really weird. Sometimes this method also does not work. So that's why I usually prefer the other way that I talked about, my favorite way. And that is this. First, convert the object into the string. It should be stringify. Okay. First, convert the object into a string and then convert the string into object and then work on that. So this works for both. Either the response is a simple S object or custom or standard object, or the response is list of objects. It could be anything. Okay. And then instead of printing the console.log as a data, we're going to print this dot records. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh this. So Rohit, there is a question for you in the chat window.
I think Amit, I think I went ahead and said rappers.
Yeah,
I'm
need
not
not to
sure.
worry.
I'm not sure if you want to explain it.
Yeah, so we will cover it in coming videos, Yogesh, sir. Need not to worry, okay? Basically, Rohit has used some fancy word, so that might be confusing for you. So, yeah, you could see here, right? Now we got the proxy, then this proxy has handler, and under handler, we've got original target that actually is giving us all the 10 records, okay? And then if you see that, every single object, every single record has a new attribute called account name. And you could see here, if I expand it, any one of them, you would see that account name is the attribute, the new attribute that we have added with the same value called salesforce.com. Okay. Now, this is one thing. Now you might be saying, okay, Amit, you use the static value. We want to use it dynamically. What is there for this contact? Okay. So now you could just go ahead and make the changes. So what you really wanted to assign in this variable is you wanted to assign whatever the account name is there for the item, for the current contact record. So you could say item dot account dot name like this. Now in the current item, in the current contact record itself, you are adding a new attribute, and what value you are adding, whatever the value you are getting from Salesforce. Okay. Now this line is going to fail when there is no account associated to contact. How? Let's see. Now I'm going to add a filter here. I will say where account ID equal to null. Okay. So what I did is I just added a filter and saying give me only the contacts whose account ID is whose account ID is null. That means these are the orphan contacts. Okay. And here what we are doing is we are saying, okay, create an attribute called account underscore name, and store whatever is coming into the item.account.name. This is definitely going to fail. Okay. Now we are going to see why it's failing. And we got the error. You could clearly see that there is an error. Uncaught exception proxy handler does not really gives us, and object also does not have, but basically we are getting the error. And the error is because sometimes you really get the error, say cannot read properties name of undefined, or sometimes you get some pop-up here in this UI itself says cannot read properties of name of undefined. Okay, like this. So why it is basically error? Can anyone tell me what is the reason behind this error? Colon? No, not at all. Like what is this colon? I really didn't understand.
I will put that by mistake.
Okay, no worries.
Because account dot name is null, right? So item dot null would be undefined, right? That is all.
Account.name is null. But before that, okay, you said account.name is null, so item.account is going to be undefined. Yeah, that could be one of the answer. Yes. So null pointer exception is not there in JavaScript. It's only there in either Java, Apex, or some other programming languages, not in JavaScript. It's in JavaScript, it's more like undefined. Okay. So yeah, basically there is no account associated with the contact. So item.account is going to be undefined. As we have seen, right? This is how it's going to, the Salesforce is going to interpret. So if this variable itself is undefined, it does not have anything, we cannot go to and read the account. So we should always use if condition. And we can say if item dot account ID, because this is our parent API name. If account ID is there, that means account is definitely going to be there if we are adding that into the query. And then we are going to put like this. And if you're doing this, that means we are doing the safe error handling, making sure. And yes, as Yogesh said, we can also use safe operator. I really don't trust safe operator. That's why I always use if condition, because safe operator really works well when you have very small or very simple conditions, but when you have complex structure, it really does not work. And it really does not let you know where the bug is. And JavaScript, as usual, it's really hectic language, so you really don't want it to make it more complex. So that's why I always use very simple syntax like if condition. Go ahead and use it and be happy. So that is basically one part of our like wire method we have already talked about. We are already using wired method. We talked about we would be preferring this wired method because we wanted to have more control on the data coming in, more modification, the manipulation, as well as we have more control over the error. We can get the error, we can make the modification in our error, we can display into the UI, and how to display that we will see into the coming sessions. So one last thing into the wire method we have already seen as part of our UI record API. Let's say that my method is accepting some parameters. For example, it's kind of accepting a string of record ID and maybe a string of first name. Okay. I'm just putting some information like this, something like this. And my method is basically accepting 2 parameters. Now, if you really wanted to call this method now using a wire method, you really have to pass these attributes. Otherwise, this method is not going to work, because this is as simple as, if you really have to call this method using Apex, you need to pass these 2 parameters, record ID, first name. Similarly, if you really wanted to access this method using wire method, you really need to pass these 2 parameters like record ID and first name. How you pass it? It's pretty simple. Just use the comma and put it the opening and closing curly braces, the name of your variable, colon, the value for your variable. If there are more than one variable, just put a comma, then name of your attribute, colon, value for your attribute. And that's how your parameterized Apex class method are going to work with the help of wire method. Any questions so far? Okay, I don't see any questions. So the last thing that we have to cover. So everyone is okay if we have to cover this imperative Apex? If not, we can maybe cover it tomorrow.
Amit, I think we should let wire sink in. I mean, like wire is itself complex thing. So maybe give them time to let it sink.
Yeah, that's why I asked, like, if everyone is okay, then only we can go ahead. Because to be honest, I feel this is really slow pace that we are going with. But if you all are okay with this pace, that's fine for me.
Let's take another simple example for wire.
Another simple example, like what? Like, I really, I'm sorry, but I really
Yeah.
cannot find as simple as that we have taken. Like, what could be
Yeah.
simple more than this? Like, if I remove this, because that's what we started with, what could be more simple than this?
Yeah.
Because that's how you will work. Like, the very simplest example of your wire method is you don't have any parameter. Okay. And you're just calling an Apex. What you can do is, maybe you create another wire method here, like aura enabled. You could create a method, make sure it is catchable, or maybe let's say we are not making it catchable. Okay, it just aura enabled. Someone is on unmute. Could you please go mute? Shivam and Sweta. So let's say hello world. Okay, and I'm not returning anything. This method is very simple, nothing else, just the 2 lines of code, even not 2 lines of code, just the method declaration, not having @catchable as a true. And let's deploy this. Okay. Now, if you wanted to call this method in our JavaScript in our Lightning Web Component, we really need to import that first and say import the name of your method. It could be anything, your wish. You can put anything like hello world, hello Salesforce, hello LWC, abracadabra. You could put anything from @Salesforce. Now, what you wanted to work with in Salesforce is Apex, because you wanted to work with Salesforce Apex. Then what is the name of your class, which is contact service? And then what is the method in your Apex class? This method, after the dot, after the class name, it should be exact matching with this method, which is hello world. Okay. And then let's use another wire here. You could use as much as wire method that you want. Let's name of your method and say wired hello. I'll say hello, just hello. This is the simplest form of your wire method. Just call a method, put it as hello. This is going to contain the value like hello equal to, it's going to have both properties, error, some error. Error is basically nothing, it is an object. Data, some data, it is type of any data. This is the simplest way of your wire method. Go ahead and deploy this. And then as your component is already added into the UI, so you just need to refresh it. And we are here, like there is only one thing that we are getting is there are 4 contacts with the condition satisfying that we are getting account ID is not null. Sorry, account ID is equal to null, and we're not getting anything else. No error, nothing. We really not sure if this works or not, because it does not have anything. We don't have error handling, nothing. And it's not giving anything in the UI as well. Like wire method must be catchable or something. We really don't get any error. Now, if you really wanted to have more control, because see, now you're not able to see if this is having a value or not. So there are 2 ways for with you that you have is you could use this hello attribute in your input component and say hello.data, and then maybe say hello.error, because these are the 2 attributes within the hello parameter, within the hello property, and you might want it to put it some separator to know if this is data or error, and then you can just go ahead and deploy it. Or you might want it to have a more control over your wire method. Then you really have to use this way. First, let's try this, what happens. So there is no data, but there are some error, but you really don't see in the UI. You really don't see what the error is. You really don't have a variable to parse that error. So if you really wanted to have more control, you have to go with this way. Let's say you have to say wired hello, utilize error and data keyword. Okay. And first of all, you need to get rid of this because now you don't have a variable called hello. Then you could say if error or else if data. Because we have seen that there is an error, so we will quickly go ahead and put the error with the message called hello world method and deploy it quickly. And then refresh it. And this time you might see the error in the browser that there is some error in your code. So you could see here, we have got the error which says that hello world method. And if you expand it, you got body, you got error type, you got headers, you got OK, status text. And body is going to have message which says that apex method that are to be cached must be marked as catchable equal to true. That's what your error is. That's why that's what I mentioned in the starting, that your method, your apex class method that you're calling using @or enabled, sorry, at that wire, it must be decorated. It must be used @catchable equal to true. So that's the very basic example of your wire method. Is it clear? Is still confusion? I'm happy to repeat it. Aura enabled is not for Aura. It's the annotation provided by Salesforce itself. It's not a Aura thing. That's why you have to use @Aura enable to make it available into your JavaScript. So basically what you're doing is you are trying to expose your Apex class outside of your Salesforce instance, because LWC is some way like here or there, it's basically your external application. So when you wanted to expose your classes to external application, you have multiple ways, like it could be using some web services, or it could be using @Aura enabled. It's not like Aura thing, it's the annotation that Salesforce just provided. And one frustrating thing about wire method is, if you have a method earlier which is not catchable equal to true, and later on after the error, if you made it catchable equal to true, you keep refreshing the page and you'll keep getting the same error. So that's why my suggestion is, if you have a method which has to be called from wire method, please don't miss to make catchable equal to true. Otherwise, you might get into this error, like keep refreshing the page to get the correct result. So I think if you're not covering imperative Apex, then we are done for today. Any questions? If you have, please feel free to ask.